Greetings, Embers, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. I'd like to thank the reformed members of the channel: Tina Mead, Seven Loves Crispin, Tammy Slayton, CAG, Denise S, Through Scrutiny, Samantha Place, Stephanie McLaren, Corpse Lover, Normie DW, Christy Elias, Cindy Cleveland, and Patty's niece. If you would like to learn how to become part of the Back to Ashes family, or would like to buy me a coffee as a special thank you, those links can be found down below. Also, if you are new here and you are enjoying what you are hearing, or have been here and haven't done so just yet, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Not only does it help the channel out, but it also reminds you of every time I upload a video. Please forgive me in this video if my voice seems a little off. I don't know why. Past couple of days, my voice has been going in and out. This rarely happens to me, so I apologize in advance. Alright, with all of that being said, it is time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person in the morning. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for this dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Let's Not Meet Stories. Right after this intro, an ad will play. I'll read the first story an ad will play, and after that there will be no more ads within this video. So, for starters, I work overnights at a hotel in a seedy area. I'm female and work the night audit. My personality is that of an unapproachable shrew, with the looks of a sultry, overworked hotel employee. I'm currently awaiting the police to show up so I can make my statement. It was so sudden and abrupt, I'm still shaking from it. An inebriated man was standing outside with his attractive girlfriend, having a cigarette, being loud and overall being disgustingly affectionate. I remember asking myself, why are you outside doing this when you just paid money for a place to do this exact same shit in? While they are doing this unknowingly to them, I noticed a man wearing an army uniform walking towards them at a very steady pace. The army man stops right next to the inebriated guy, puts his hand on his shoulder, which startles him, and says something. I'm assuming he asks for a cigarette. Regardless, the inebriated man stops what he's doing and starts to fumble around in his pockets. I guess the man had asked for a cigarette because he went to extend his hand out to the soldier. And all of a sudden, a red four-door something speeds around the corner like a bat out of hell. Stops right in front of the couple. The army guy pushes the man aside while holding his wrist, and the woman is pulled into the car, and then the inebriated man is also thrown in. The soldier jumps in and they drive off. I observed all of this from my desk, and there was nothing I could do, no matter how fast I ran, no matter how quickly I could have gotten to her. It would have not been fast enough, especially with the situation that had just taken place. I'm freaking my shit, so I'm sorry for any grammatical errors in the story. Let this be a lesson to everyone out there. No matter how safe you may feel, you're not. So to the soldier and the people in that red car, let's never meet. Update. The man is nowhere to be found. The woman is in the hospital. She is safe now. They wouldn't give me any info other than they need to run tests on her and allow her to recover from her night before they can question her. They think the guy she was with was involved. This is a story of someone I knew and had cut ties with because he was a fucking psycho. The first half will be to add context as to why I cut him off, and the second half is what makes it a let's not meet. I don't know if he uses Reddit, so I'll omit ages and locations. It started about 4 years ago when I was living in a friend's house while attending a nearby university. It was myself, my friend, his sister, and their parents. Roughly about 2 weeks into staying there, my friend's sister invited her boyfriend to live in the house too. And by all accounts, he was a pretty cool guy at first. Very sociable and full of great stories. We often sat around the table for drinks or talked about life, having a smoke in the garden. Within the first month, however, as he started to get comfortable, cracks started to show in his veneer. He would rant about government conspiracy, how he was always a wronged party. He was big into Sigma male bullshit and martial arts, and Christ did he have a temper. He had this big dog he always kept in a cage that was extremely violent when he wasn't around. The dog attacked his girlfriend and had to be put down. That's when the guilt trips towards her began and the ranting became incessant. About 2 months later, he had the bright idea to live in a shipping container, mainly because the parents wanted him out, and dragged his girlfriend along for the ride. I'm not talking about one of those chic little restoration jobs. This was a rented container in a storage yard among the outskirts of the town we were living in. He would intimidate and threaten the staff there constantly until they called the police. This, of course, was another conspiracy. He became increasingly abusive to his girlfriend, to the point where the family got involved to get her out of there. I stuck close to them, having pretend to be on his side until we could safely get her out. They broke up, which he blamed me for claiming I was poisoning her against him to make her mine. She has a new partner now and they are happy. We all blocked the psycho ex on everything possible, but he continued to harass them until eventually he disappeared, or so we thought. Fast forward to last year, I started to receive messages over social media from several different accounts, blocking each one in turn when I discovered who it was. Some friendly and some hostile. One of these profiles, however, was pretending to be someone I knew from university. We talked about life and how things were going. Eventually, I was invited to a house party, claiming it was a free house and plenty of people were coming. I booked the time off work, made my travel plans, and kept talking to this friend coming up to the date of the party. I mentioned it to my friend's sister, and she was interested in going herself, until I mentioned the address, and then she panicked. The address in question was a property belonging to the crazy ex's father that was scheduled for sale. I waited until the day of the party and called the police to check the property, claiming a suspected break-in. They found 5 people there, including the ex. Parked out the front was a butcher's van, equipped for food storage, and a collection of knives, hammers, and rope. I'm really glad I decided not to go. When I was 11, we, my single mom, 9-year-old sister, and 6-year-old brother, moved into a beautiful older craftsman-styled house. I'd heard it was around 80 years old back then in 1984. As soon as we moved in, we found out it was infested with cockroaches. I've never seen anything like it. You turn on the lights at night and they'd scatter from every surface. We had to store all of our food that wasn't canned in the fridge, so they wouldn't get into it. We tried bug bombs and professional exterminators numerous times with no effect. Those things really can survive a nuclear war. Anyway, they weren't the reason we lived in the house less than a year before fleeing for our lives. I just thought it was an interesting side story. To this day, roaches are near the top of my most detested bugs list. I remember my mom discussing our next-door neighbor's creepy son with my grandma. He was in his 20s or 30s. She'd been doing dishes one day and looked up to see him standing directly on the other side of the kitchen window, staring in at her. Normally, she would have kept something crazy like this from us kids, but about that time, she told us to tell her if we ever saw him near the house, and we weren't allowed to play outside. She also told us about a couple of times when she woke up to see him standing over her bed, and one time he put a cloth with chemicals over her face to knock her out. This is the part of the story I know the least about, since she didn't tell us about it until years later. I think she might have thought she was dreaming, especially if he was drugging her. I don't know if anything else happened. I've never asked her about it in case something did and it brought up bad memories. So one afternoon we were all doing some spring cleaning when my brother said he found a cigarette butt in the upstairs toilet. Weird, since nobody in our family smokes. Being a dumb little 6-year-old, he flushed it before telling our mom. I still remember her trying to get the entire story out of him, being upset that the evidence was gone, and thinking he might have been mistaken, or maybe he picked up a butt somewhere outside out of curiosity. She soon dropped it and we mostly forgot about it. I think it was a few weeks later, my brother was spending the night at our grandparents', and my sister and I were the only ones upstairs. Our mom's bedroom was downstairs. My sister heard a sound like a screen door slamming, but she insisted it came from in the house, and she was freaked out. I told her it was just from outside and to go to sleep. A minute later, we heard a strangled cough coming from just outside our bedroom door. A man's cough. And it sounded like he was trying to keep from making noise. I whispered that we needed to get downstairs. We snuck out of the room, and I had the irrational urge to turn on the light in the bathroom, which was just across the hall from our bedroom, and check and see if anyone was there. Then, just as strong of a feeling to get away from the bathroom and get downstairs, now. The scariest moment of my life was when we were creeping down the stairs in the pitch black. It was a spiral enclosed staircase with walls, the perfect place for someone to hide. The stairway light had burned out, and the wood steps were creaky, so it was terrifying making our way down. We got downstairs and woke up our mom, panicked that there was a guy upstairs in our bedroom. She started to tell us to go back to bed, but could see we were seriously scared. She went over to the bottom of the stairway to go up and show us there was nothing to be scared about. Then she had just as strong of a feeling to close the stairway door and lock it, and I do mean now. She did, called the cops, they found nothing, and didn't really take us seriously. The next day, she called a PD detective friend of hers from high school to come over and inspect the house. Remembering the cigarette butt in the toilet, she had him look at the upstairs bathroom window. It was a high, narrow, rectangular window, not very big, but just wide enough for a person. Who knows how many times the intruder climbed our roof to get in, and was upstairs while we were sleeping across the hall. The window swung up on hinges. When my mom's friend let the window drop, it sounded like a screen door slamming. He said the locks on all the windows were so old they were practically useless, and we needed to get out of the house immediately. We moved into my grandma's house that day. When my mom went with her brothers a few days later to pack up some things, a back door had been smashed open, but nothing in the house was disturbed. I've edited to clarify why it seemed like my mom was in denial about the guy going into her room. I'm honestly not clear on the details since she never told us much about what she saw. I think she might have been out of it because of the chloroform and probably thought she was imagining it. The puzzle pieces came into place after the detective checked out our house and confirmed someone was indeed breaking in. As soon as she knew we were in real danger, she got us out of there immediately. A few years later, we heard the neighbor's son was arrested for sexual assault and attempted murder. I still wonder what might have happened if I had turned on that bathroom light, if my mom didn't lock the stairway door, or if we didn't leave the house when we did. I also wonder if it's still infested with those disgusting cockroaches. Before I start this story, I would like to say, Cindy Cleveland, I think you're really going to like this one because this is right up your alley. Here we go, everyone. So, this happened a little over 2 years ago now, and I wanted to post it somewhere just to look back on it one day and never forget the lesson I learned. Disclaimer, yes, this is real, and I wished it wasn't. It was 2016, and I had just started a new job at a motel. It was low pay, but I needed an office job. One of my friends, Michael, got me the job. For a few days. I did training with the owner in the mornings. For 2 nights, Michael trained me. Our job was the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Nothing exciting, checking guests in and doing paperwork. My boss, who is also the owner, went away with his wife on vacation for a week, which is attributed to the swift training I had to endure. So it was my first night alone on the night shift. There was a monitor with security cameras around the motel's property and large glass windows all around the office building with a glass door. There was no night window like most motels have. It was fairly early in the night. At about 1 a.m., I was just doing my normal check-in paperwork when a man walks in and asks if we have any rooms available. Usually, if someone is sketchy, my boss has me lie and says no, but he seemed normal at the moment. Without hesitation, I said, "Yes, of course, just for one?" And he replies, "Yes." So I began creating the reservation on the computer when I noticed he starts swatting the air and making spitting noises, as if he's being surrounded by flies. I tried to ignore it. As far as I was concerned, it wasn't my business. So I tried to check him into the room as quickly as possible. I give him his key and he's on his way. At this point in time, I could be described as very timid. I had a lot going on in my personal life, so I hope you can all understand my reaction to what happens next. The man comes back from his room and slams his hand on the glass door and causes me to jump. Although frightened, I looked up to see him just staring at me. He cracks the door and puts his head through and says, "I can't get into my room. Why won't you let me into my room?" And my only defense is trying to be helpful. So I replied, maybe there's something wrong with your key? Let me give you another one." The look he had in his eyes was inexplicable. I felt like I was in absolute danger. I handed him his new key and he went back to his room. I tried texting Michael because he is the one who trained me, though it was the middle of the night and he was asleep. I needed some guidance. With no reply from Michael, I noticed the man trudging down the stairs to come back. I go into absolute panic mode. I run into the back office and lock the door, and I pull out my pocket knife. It's important to keep protection when working at night. I hear the man in the office yelling, "Hello? Hello? Why won't you let me into my room? Do you not like me?" Me being an absolute idiot and not standing my ground and calling the police when I'm feeling scared, I decided to take the situation on alone. I reply, I'm just on the phone. I'll be right out." I then start calling Michael over and over for help. No answer. I decided to take a few more deep breaths and then step out of the office. The man wasn't there. He was in the bathroom. I started hearing him talking to himself, angrily saying, "Kill her! Kill her!" My heart sank. Still being an idiot and not calling the police, he comes out and I say, Your key was broken. I'm sorry. Let me escort you to your room." He agrees, thankfully. I was wearing a long sleeve sweater, so with my arms down, I was able to hide my knife in my hand while holding it. I began to walk outside and he seemed insistent to walk behind me. We began making our way to the staircase and end up towards his room. I was sweating from how nervous I was, continuously looking behind me to make sure he wasn't going to make a move. He stops at a room, and I stop at his room a few doors down. I smile and say, "Oh, that's the wrong room. This one's your room," as it clearly said on the door. The whole time he was going up to someone else's room and trying to open their door. I felt bad for them. I quickly ran back to the office and locked the door. The next guest I checked in was a police officer from a few towns away. I felt bad for confiding in them about the guy, but they seemed willing to keep an eye and ear out for me. The next night, the man came back, but I had the doors locked and told him we were all booked up. I explained to my boss what happened when he got back from vacation. However, he didn't take me seriously. I continued to work there on the night shift for the next year, where many other strange encounters happened. So, strange man, let's never meet again. If you ever feel uncomfortable on a night shift, always call the police. I worked graveyard shift for a long time. One night about 25 years ago, I had caught up with my night's work, but was unable to back up the work I had done. I decided to clock out and drive to Walmart to buy a box of new discs and leave the receipt for our bookkeeper so she could reimburse me. A few days after this incident, we learned that our computer has a virus that was corrupting the floppy disks we were using. So, you get the picture. Floppy disks for backup. No cell phones for most of us. It was a primitive time. I arrived at Walmart at about 3 a.m., went in and found the discs. I decided to visit the toy department as it was early November and I wanted to get Christmas gift ideas for my son, as well as several nieces and nephews. While I browsed, I felt someone watching me. I looked around and there were 3 men nearby, and all were staring straight at me. I looked back at them long enough to fix their appearances in my mind and went on looking at toys. I was in no hurry. I was off the clock. It wouldn't need much time to back up my work after I got back to the office, so I continued to look around, even strolled through housewares for a few moments. Every time I looked over my shoulder, those 3 guys were close and watching me. After the second time, alarms were sounding in my head. They were repellent looking, with pasty pale faces, as if they spent all their time indoors eating junk food, and their eyes were cold and hard. What disturbed me most was the way they were dressed. Much too warmly for the weather that night. Even though it was November, it was about 55 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I was perfectly comfortable in a jean jacket. These guys were in heavy coats suitable for sub-freezing temperatures, and they had them buttoned to their necks inside the store. The only reason I could think of for that was that they were hiding weapons beneath their coats. I finally headed towards the cash registers, thinking that if no one else was leaving the store when I did, I would ask the cashier to call security and request an escort to my vehicle. As I reached the register, I saw my stalkers standing just inside the doors. They muttered amongst themselves for a moment, then they exited the store. As I was paying, a man and woman lined up behind me. I had seen them shortly before I neared the register, and they didn't seem to be paying any attention to me. I moved to the area between the registers and the doors and stood waiting for the couple, fiddling with my buttons, blowing my nose. When they moved towards the doors, so did I, staying just a few steps ahead of them. I had parked not far outside, and I reached my vehicle quickly. The stalkers were sitting in a car that was parked nose to nose with my pickup truck. I hopped in, locked the door, then sat back and stared at them. The couple I had used as my unwitting escorts walked past me and the stalkers and got into a car a few spaces away. They left. After a minute or two, the stalker driver said something to the others, started the engine, and pulled away. I watched as they slowly left the parking lot, then ascended the nearby interstate highway overpass and took the entrance ramp. Only then did I start my engine. I took my time looking around as the engine warmed up. I continued along the street for a couple of miles past the interstate, then pulled into a dark lot behind a strip mall, turned off all my lights and the engine, and waited, watching the few vehicles that passed. I wanted to be certain that I would not lead these guys to my office building, which was isolated and, at that hour, usually deserted, except for me. After my pulse slowed to normal, I restarted the truck and returned to work. I am female, but I'm almost 6 feet tall and weigh about 175 pounds. I know that my size has protected me from a lot of mayhem over the years. I was also armed that night. I carried a loaded Smith & Wesson .357 revolver, as well as a speed loader, which is like an extra cylinder full of bullets. Still, I probably would have been no match for 3 determined assailants. This experience cured me of my nonchalance about running errands in the wee hours of the morning and validated my conviction that anytime I get the feeling of someone's eyes crawling all over me, it's wise to look around and find the reason. About 3 months later, my husband and I were watching the local evening news, and they showed photos of 2 of those stalkers. They were wanted for armed robbery. So, career criminals who stalked me in Walmart one night? Let's not ever meet again. All right, dear listeners, this next story has 2 parts, so I'm going to read it straight through. I'll let you know when I start part 2. Cool? Here we go. A little over a year ago, I had a job working overnight at a gas station close to my house. I am a woman and was 31 at the time. I know to some it seems unsafe for a woman to work graveyard shifts by herself. However, it was a slow store and the sheriff's office was about 20 feet across from it. I really didn't think I would have that many problems. There would be about 30 customers in an 8-hour shift, and that was on a busier night. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to sweep the parking lot and last minute check the trash. It was time for a cigarette and I had one headphone in, kind of jamming out. Across the road in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, I saw a figure with his back to me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, it looked like he was enjoying a much-needed piss. Against the sheriff's office, though? Yeah, the building closed at 4 p.m. and didn't open again till 6 the next morning. But why? By the back of his ripped white t-shirt, I remembered that he had come in about 4 hours earlier. He was a total creep, and I could already tell he had a good buzz going. I didn't say anything, though. I just took my eyes off of him and tried not to draw attention to myself. It was working until a car pulled in. I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look at the car and then at me and back and forth again. As the customer was leaving, I walked her outside. I still had half a smoke burning, and had left my dustpan outside with the squeegee. We both heard him start to swear angrily and seemingly engage in an argument with himself. She looked across the road and told me to be careful. I made an awkward joke about him being the one who should be more afraid of me or something like that. The man was still there, but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of my store. Whatever he's yelling was completely unintelligible. He was obviously very drunk and can barely stand straight, still swaying away. I didn't engage him, but I didn't take my eyes off of him this time. I just slowly walked back into the store. Something about his face really bothered me. It had a darkness to it, but his eyes looked wild. My experience during graveyard jobs has been that the crazy-eyed ones are the worst ones. I didn't like it at all and wanted no part of it. I still had almost 3 hours to go and 2 before any other employees got there. Instantly, I went to the computer and typed up a temporarily closed sign, just in case he wanted trouble. I was coming around the counter on my way to the doors when I saw that he had walked across the road to my side now. I literally just barely got the second door locked when he stumbled into our very small parking lot. My hand mimed the hand signal for cut across my neck, basically saying, "Nope, sorry, you can't come in here, we're closed." I shook my head back and forth too, hoping to further discourage him. He started walking away, but screamed something at me while he was walking. I don't mean he was grumpy and shouted at me or yelled that I was an asshole or anything. I mean, like he was at an enraged volume and was violently throwing his hands everywhere. Definitely knowing I'm in the wrong shift of the wrong job. I got really skeeved out. I decided to call the cops. It's a good thing too, because the minute I hung up with them, there he comes again up to the door. He starts pulling and banging on it. He backs up and runs into it, trying to ram it. Not that it would have done him any good. I made the mistake of telling him that I had called the cops, and his ass was about to be grassed. I say I had made the mistake of telling him because once I said that, he took off. The police never found him. They drove around the road and surrounding neighborhoods for over an hour, but found no one. He was on foot, so I don't get where he could have gone to. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, I didn't fill out a police report or anything. I was safe behind thick glass doors that were locked for the rest of my shift. It just sucked. Maybe if I didn't warn him ahead of time, I wouldn't have had to spend the last 3 months of my job constantly looking over my shoulder. I'll never know what the right choice was. I'm just glad I don't work there anymore. Part 2. Maybe it's just me, but this really freaked me out. I had just started working graveyard at the gas station close to my house. I believe it was my 6th shift altogether, but the 4th being by myself. It was just after 11 o'clock p.m., and this man came in. He's about 40 and had the dumbest haircut I had ever seen. Think botched bowl cut. Anyway, he asked me if I had change for 100. I told him I'm sorry, but I wasn't allowed to even take it. And even if I was, I didn't have the change. Side note, the company's third shift policy was we were not to take $50 or $100 bills, period. Well, he got upset and started complaining. He started trying to talk me into getting change from the safe. I apologized, but again said that I couldn't. I tried my best to continue on to the elderly customer waiting behind him. He called out to his friend to ask if he had anything smaller. The kind lady I was waiting on asked me to hold her bag while she used the restroom. Bowl Cut's friend comes in and I immediately saw that he's on drugs. Now, I try not to judge people, but it was very obvious. His face was covered in sores, kept touching at them, and he kept bouncing in places on his toes like some kind of tweaker prize fighter. The friend started asking me questions. "Hey, sweetheart, how you doing? Are you always here by yourself? Do they let you have weapons behind the counter? And if so, do you carry one with you to work?" "I always carry a gun." "How much money do they allow you to carry in these drawers? Do you still have to do safe drops even though business was so slow?" Each question that he asked me made me slightly more uncomfortable. I'm kind of a mouthy woman, and I don't always use my head before I speak. Finally, I interrupted him and was like, "Look, do you plan to rob me? Because if you are, then you're wasting time. I don't have time for this. I need to get back to work." His hands fly up, and he starts sputtering. Whoa, whoa, whoa. "Rob you? What the fuck? I was just trying to make conversation. The fuck is wrong with you?" I answered with, "Well then, your conversational skills could really use some work. You don't ask a woman working alone overnight these type of questions. So the real question is, what the fuck is wrong with you?" I saw now that Bulkhead had pulled the car horizontally across the parking spaces closest to the door. Upon seeing this, I was just beyond done at this point. I told him to leave the store and not to ever come back during my shift or I will be calling the cops. He left. The poor woman who had gone to the bathroom had heard some of the exchange. She came up to me before leaving the store and asked if I was all right. I told her that I was and thanked her. Just a weird customer that gave me a weird feeling. He only came back once after that. I was in the cooler and could hear him yelling at the manager about not being allowed in the store. The manager told him he listened to the audio and would have done the same thing that I did. I know what some could possibly be thinking. I was over defensive and dramatic. He was probably asking about the money because I couldn't exchange his friend's 100. But what about the other questions he asked? And what were his true intentions? I'm a woman that works night audit at a small hotel property in a small-ass town. I am used to working alone, and it takes quite a bit to scare me or freak me out. I have dealt with domestic disturbances, hostile homeless men twice my size, and helped get rid of the prostitution problem on our property. Over 2 years ago, it's no longer an issue here. So when I say that this man really creeped me the fuck out, no, it means a lot. What is it with this week, man? Every night has been some other dumpster fire for me to put out. But oh boy, does tonight's particular creepy dumpster fire take the cake. So I'm sitting at the desk browsing Reddit as you do, when a guest heads my way from the first floor rooms. I don't think much of it. He gets up to me and picks up a brochure for our rewards program and starts asking me about it. NBD. It's legit my job to answer these questions. He starts off his questions standing catty-cornered to me and ends up right in front of me. He says thanks and leaves. Was he kind of awkward? Yes, but not anything I haven't dealt with before. About 5 to 10 minutes pass, and here he comes again. This time saying that a friend of his is supposed to come pick him up and wants to know if anybody has come by asking about him. I tell him no, that no one has been in for a while. Honestly, this was my first mistake, but hindsight and all that. He paces back and forth in the lobby for a few minutes before asking if he can stand to the side of the front desk, almost right next to me, as something was wrong with his neck and he couldn't see out the door properly. Red flag number 2, because there was a couch directly in front of me that had a section that if you sat there, you could face the door and parking lot. But I apparently lost my damn mind tonight. I say, I guess. He stands there and starts asking questions about his room, saying that he was supposed to be transferring to a suite tomorrow. We are an all-suites property. I said I don't know anything about that, but asked for his last name so I could check. And of course, he wouldn't tell me his last name. He kept mouthing something at me and then whispering something just barely audible. It really seemed to me that he wanted me to lean in to hear what he was saying, but hell no, man. By this time, I was already uncomfortable and just stared at him, telling him several times that I am hard of hearing and he will need to speak up. When that didn't work, I asked what his room number was so I could look it up that way. He said he didn't remember. Okay, I asked what floor he's on. He says he doesn't know. Now, I watched him come from the first floor rooms and knew that he was staying down there. I just wasn't sure which room he was in. So now I know that for some reason, he doesn't want me to know which room he is staying in, and for some reason, this makes me start to feel really unsafe. He finally gives me the last name, Johnson. I tell him we have no one here under that name. He says, maybe it's under my boss's name, but can't give me a name for that either. He then says maybe it's under his company name, but he told me he works for the highway patrol for a small mechanic shop, Joe Dirt Mechanics, and that he works general construction under a contractor whose name he doesn't know. While he tells me all of this, he keeps doing that weird whisper thing, trying to get me to lean closer to him, but my brain is flashing red neon warning signs and screaming, "Danger, Will Robinson, danger, Will Robinson," as loud as possible. So I print a random piece of paper off the computer and tell him I need to step into the back office to make some copies. He seems to take the hint and heads back down the hallway, leaving me free to freak out in the back, but also free to grab my pepper spray. As I walk back out, I realize that instead of actually leaving, he just moved around the corner, out of sight, to wait for me to come back to the desk. I feel better armed with my pepper spray, and I'm ready to haul ass and lock myself in the back office if he tries anything. This time he doesn't stay long, just asks about the restaurant he can see out the door and windows. He wants to know if he would be safe walking down there by himself. I tell him he will be fine, that I walk down there by myself all the time. Stupid, I know. Super fucking stupid. And have never had any problems. He angles for a ride for a little bit, but I lied on this one and told him I don't have a car. He leaves and heads down to this restaurant while I am just glad this seems to be over. He is only gone maybe 15 minutes when he walks back in the door carrying a cup from the restaurant saying how he didn't like the food there. I tell him that's too bad and make myself look busy with paperwork. He seems to take the hint and leaves again. By this point, every interaction with him has left me feeling more creeped out and unsafe than the last, and I started texting my husband, telling him what was going on. The next and last time I saw him last night, I heard him coming down the hall because he was on the phone, and when I looked up, he was staring at me really intently. So I gathered some papers and went into the back office to avoid him. I heard him pass the desk and go out the doors, so I peeked into my manager's office to see him standing at her window, peering in, trying to see me from there. I called my husband at that point and told him to haul ass up here because I can't do this anymore. As I'm on the phone, I get the courage to peek back around the corner to the manager's office and the window he was peeping into and notice that he is gone. I told my husband to be on the lookout for this guy walking outside of the hotel or between the hotel and the restaurant. I look out the window and don't see him anywhere, but go back into hiding just in case. My husband comes flying into the parking lot and comes in to find me hiding in the back, telling me that he looked everywhere and didn't see anyone. Within 1 minute, this creepy guy comes in the front door trying to talk to me over my husband, but after a very murderous look from my wonderful man, he booked out of the lobby and didn't come back in for the rest of the night. I had my husband stay to play security guard just in case, but nothing came of it until this morning when the housekeeper, filling in for the regular breakfast attendant, lets me know that this same guy was around yesterday morning and was denied a room by our manager for creeping out the housekeeper. The manager even had to go with her to take out the trash because this guy was so unsettling. Apparently, he came back after the manager left for the day and got a room for the one man on the front desk staff. Here's a quick edit. I want to add that I know calling the cops was probably the right move here, but at my property, they really don't like us calling the cops on guests. And I didn't want to risk my job for a gut feeling when he hadn't done anything on the cameras other than talk to me. If the creepier stuff he had done had been captured, I would have had to call the cops in a heartbeat. I do sanctuary work at festivals and burns. For those unfamiliar, sanctuary spaces at these events generally refer to encampments that are set up specifically for people who are not a medical risk or an immediate security risk, but have probably eaten way too many psychedelic drugs and need someone to keep an eye on them and be nice to them for a few hours. It may involve allowing them to talk through some difficult shit, going to town on a coloring book, or just providing a comforting silent presence. Trip sitting can be a thoroughly rewarding experience. The team I work with sets up a large, elegant dome tent at events that is open for anyone who needs a break from the festival environment, which can obviously be overstimulating at times. We also usually have a few smaller tents intended for people who may be more escalated and not too keen on being around groups. However, on the weekend in question, we grossly underestimated attendance numbers and did not bring the small tents. This will be an important detail later on. I was assigned to the late night shifts, 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., on both the Friday night and Saturday night of the festival. There was a small and low-key crowd in the tent on Friday night, mainly folks just chilling and talking quietly, appreciating the music in the distance. I took brief note of one fellow in there who seemed ordinary enough. He wasn't speaking and his eyes were quite enlarged, but that is not out of the ordinary for guests. He appeared content keeping to himself, so I didn't interact with him much. For some reason, I had reoccurring thoughts about that guy the next day. It was a small festival, and I saw him wandering around a few times with those same dilated eyes and tightly clenched jaw, always by himself. This wasn't necessarily a red flag at the time, except that this happened to be a festival where a lot of people know each other, and the telltale signs of tripping tend to wear off after about 8 hours max. Each time I noticed him, I grew increasingly uneasy, but dismissed it as irrational paranoia and went about my fun. Saturday night rolls around, and I was excited to catch the set of a DJ I liked before my next sanctuary shift. As I was boogieing, I saw the bug-eyed dude about 10 feet away, staring straight ahead with that same static expression and 1,000-yard stare. Irrational or not, I felt the need to create more distance between us and quickly moved to a different part of the crowd. No sooner did I sigh in relief and resume dancing, I looked to my left, and there he was, now 5 inches from my face, eyes like saucers, exclaiming, "Hey, hi, hi." I was so startled that I booked it away from the strange area and, thankfully, bumped into a friend who helped me laugh it off. 4 a.m. rolls around, and I am sharing this story with my co-staff, whom I consider a good friend and colleague. We'll call him G-Man. Not a minute after I finish recounting my "what a creeper" anecdote, a golf cart rose up like fucking clockwork, and out of it steps, guess who? Googly Eyes. Normally, our golf cart transports come to us via the medics or security teams, and they fill us in on what they can about the person who needs help. But whoever was driving this one unceremoniously dumps this weirdo into our care and speeds off into the night without a word. I silently signal that this is the guy I had been talking about, and G-Man takes charge. For reference, I'm a woman, so it would have been more appropriate for G-Man to do so even without the pre-context. Googly Eyes says he needs to use the bathroom, so G-Man escorts him to the porta-johns, only to come back alone 10 minutes later. Turns out, Googly Eyes was making lewd comments to the woman in line for the porta-johns, and when G-Man tried to gently redirect him, Googly Eyes decided he was tired of male company and told him to piss off. We never force people to stay at the sanctuary, and G-Man was visibly irritated by the encounter, so it seemed for the best. Case closed, right? We decided to check in with one of our homies on security, just for due diligence, and it turns out they'd already spoken to the dude. I can't recall why, but it was for a minor infraction of something. The moment our conversation wraps up, 2 things happen at once. Number 1, a couple of my friends arrive escorting a young, half-nude woman to the tent, so I immediately spring into action. And number 2, our old friend Googly Eyes takes this opportune timing to reappear out of the darkness like, "Goddamn Beetlejuice. Fuck, 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 fuck," Brain says. He hasn't done anything severe enough for us to ban him from the sanctuary, since we deal with people in altered states. The threshold for bizarre behavior is very high, but as I mentioned earlier, we were also lacking the privacy of our smaller tents. The young woman probably would have benefited from some time in one anyway, given her condition, but I particularly didn't want Googly Eyes anywhere near her. With both of them now in the same sanctuary space, I did my best to create a physical boundary, discreetly as possible. My 2 friends, both female, stayed with us for a little while to try to make her feel at ease. She was alert but nonverbal and had been distressed and disoriented when they found her. Googly Eyes immediately starts inching closer and closer to us, intermittently, butting into our conversation, his tense jaw stretched into an unsettling grimace. I can practically feel him eyeing all of us, especially the girl I was trying to take care of, who was still rather exposed from the waist up. At this point, G-Man, our shift lead, who had been roaming the grounds up until then, we'll call him B-Money, and another male team member who is off shift but hanging out, are also in the space. G-Man is keeping an eye on the situation, but can't do a whole lot at this point because Googly Eyes has already flared up at him, and intervening could have exacerbated matters. Nevertheless, I fucking had enough of this for one night and quietly go over to tell the guys that I'm extremely uncomfortable. B-Money is a pro at this kind of work and immediately develops a plan. He approaches Googly Eyes and gives him a series of odd tasks. "Hey man, can you inspect this rock for me?" "Hi friend, would you watch this sage stick?" Googly Eyes is clearly struggling with these complicated instructions and asks B-Money to leave him alone. B-Money says, "That's fine dude, no worries. But first, can you rearrange those colored pencils?" At last, Googly Eyes gets flustered and huffs off, and every muscle in my body finally relaxes. We have a lovely remainder of our shift, chatting and doing art until the sun comes up. We even got our other guests to laugh a little bit, and by dawn, she is able to talk and walk back to her campsite on her own. Sunday Fun Day on the last day of the festival is magical, but I'm wrecked by afternoon and drive home to decompress. Word on Facebook come Monday is that someone was taken into custody by local law enforcement on Sunday evening in connection with some thefts that had taken place over the weekend. But I didn't get the full story until a couple of weeks later when our team met to debrief. Turns out that a number of tickets had been hustled for and sold at a discount to locals near the festival property, which happens to be in an area of the rural South where you paddle extra fast if you hear banjos. In other words, some tickets wound up in the hands of folks who were not there for the music or the yoga workshops. One of our team members had to run off some Duck Dynasty extras who showed up at Sanctuary looking to get some, demanding to know where them topless women were at. If you haven't already guessed, one of these discounted ticket holders happened to be Googly Eyes, who also turned out to be the fucker who got arrested for some of the robberies. Once apprehended by festival security and turned over to the county police, they also discovered that he was on meth. Well, I guess that's hence the eyes in the jaw. And was in possession of a handgun, presumably the whole time he was lurking in the sanctuary. Googly Eyes, please get your shit together and let's not ever meet again. It happened 8 years ago during the summer. A little backstory there. I was at my mom's house, but she barely lived there anymore. She spent most of her time at her boyfriend's. And my sister was very often left alone. I was a student in another city, but I came back to my house during the holidays. I was 19 and my sister was 16 at that time. Our house had 2 floors, living room and kitchen on the first floor, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom on the second floor. The kitchen and the living room had 2 door windows opening on a large terrace. From the terrace, you could go in the backyard by some stairs. We didn't really use the ground floor, as it was very dark due to the small windows, and it was basically a garage and an office to do our homework. Like I said, it was summer. It was very hot. I just discovered Game of Thrones, and I had 2 seasons to watch. Every evening, I took my laptop, made myself comfortable on the terrace near the kitchen, and watched an episode, or 10. My garden was surrounded by a U-shaped building, so you could see very well my terrace and my garden from their balconies. Some working men were there for about a couple of days now, and were working late, so I often see them while I'm watching the series in the evening. They were minding their own business, and so did I, so I didn't think much of it. One morning, I was sleeping late, and my sister woke me up whispering, "Wake up, there's a man in the house." I was half naked because of the heavy heat of that summer. I stood up, perfectly awake now, grabbed a shirt, and went downstairs, practically running. I know this is a dumb thing to do, a half-naked, helpless young woman, but I am very protective of my little sister, and I didn't feel any fear to this point. I went down to the kitchen, couldn't find a sharp knife, so I took a fork. Absurd, I know. While I asked her where did she see him. She told me she was watching TV in the living room, and because the windows were open, she saw a man on the reflect standing just behind her. She jumped off the couch and found herself standing in front of him. A tall man in his late 30s. She had no chance in a fight. The guy had one of his feet on the first step to the second floor where I was sleeping. She shouted, Who are you?" He didn't answer and just walked quietly back in the kitchen where the door window was wide open and took the stairs back to the garden. As soon as I heard that, I ran into the backyard with my harmless weapon to my gate in front of our garden. I even went to the street looking for him. I'm sure that if I had found him, I would not have been so brave anymore and would have probably pissed myself. But, well, I didn't see him. Suddenly, I realized my sister was still alone in the house, and maybe that fucker was there too. I went back to the kitchen, searched in the house, but thank God we were alone. This is when I saw my computer was missing. My sister told me that the guy didn't have anything in his hands when he left. That was the scariest part because it meant either he was in the house for quite some time before, took the laptop, and came back to do whatever the fuck he was planning to do, or there was another person still in here. I put some decent clothes on and took my sister to the police station nearby. I'm very angry with the policeman. She was a minor, so I stayed with her. She told them everything and described the guy with a lot of details. Then they asked her, "Could you recognize him?" And she said, "Yes, without a doubt." They said, "You know, it's highly unlikely we find him. You should be thankful you and your sister haven't been sexually assaulted." Like she needed to be more frightened than she already was. They wrote in the description that she was too shaken up and could not recognize the man, even though she said the contrary multiple times. We never heard from them. When we came back to the house, she was very scared, and I was very angry with the loss of my very expensive laptop. I needed it for art school, and I had all of my photos on there. And the attitude of the freaking police. We both sat out on the terrace and talked about what happened and how lucky we were she saw that man before he came upstairs. This is when I noticed the working men weren't there anymore. From the streets, no one can ever know we had a backyard and another entry into the house. My sister told me it was acting like he knew a bit of the house. Maybe it was the first time and we didn't notice. We never know. I'm certain it was one of those men working in that neighbor's balcony who's been watching me that broke in that morning. From that day, we double-locked the doors and slept in the same bed for weeks. I'm sorry about my English. I'm not a native speaker. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true Let's Not Meet stories. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed this collection. In the meantime, please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.